Hi, folks. Welcome to the 55th episode of this podcast. I was even counting this morning just to be sure. Yeah, it's 55 now. It's incredible. And there were some bumps along the way, but that's a part of any journey. But I'm delighted I get here. And I have the great honor to have Stepen, our to talk with us. Married to talk about his journey, which is also with plenty of insight. So he was in corporate. Now he has a more relaxed lifestyle. I think many people can relate to that. So I think there's what to be learned here. And let's see how is he going. But in the meantime, I want to encourage everyone to subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And if you enjoy this kind of conversations, real, please give us a thumbs up. That's how this thing gets spread. And if you know someone who's in the topics of travel, writing, pursuing an alternative lifestyle, share. We'll be here for an hour, 1.5. So there's plenty to be said. And I'm very much looking forward from a personal point of view. So you are very welcome, Stepen.
Thank you for having me, Vitor. Yes, looking forward to chatting about travel, lifestyle, and anything else that comes up.
So let's get into that journey. I think the transition, let's use it that term in lack of a better one, happened when you were in Spain. So let's get straight into that. Tell me about that trip to Spain. I think it was the Camino or something like that.
Yes, that's right. And I think actually I'd say transition is a pretty good word to describe my journey from going from the corporate world, to working more flexibly and being able to travel and pursue some of my passions. But I guess, how would I say, I ended up on the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain. At the point when I was just sort of coming up to the age of about 40, and you might say, kind of midlife crisis, a lot of potential for change there, and if any of your listeners who haven't heard of the Camino de Santiago, I think where you're from Portugal, obviously it's well known. It's a Catholic pilgrimage. Perhaps in the UK and United States to a lesser extent, it's less well known. The Camino has its roots in a Christian pilgrimage and was the second biggest pilgrimage in medieval times after the pilgrimage to Rome. And but now I think people do it for some people still do it for Christian reasons, for sort of a rites of passage in that sense. Whereas other people do it now for a challenge of walking across a country, walking across Spain, northern Spain, to Santiago de Compostela. I think some people do it for cultural reasons, and other people do it when they're looking, they're maybe a bit of lost in life, they're looking for some change, maybe they've suffered a bad experience and they're just looking for a reason to walk, and because the walk takes about 30 days on average for the average walker, and having having an experience away from their normal environment. And they say the Camino is a magical walk as well, and and things happen to you as you walk. So I ended up in Spain, in actual fact on a little village called Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port, which is on the border of France and Spain in the Pyrenees, where you typically start the classical Camino walk. So it's a little alpine town, as I say, on the border of Spain. And I was there, I guess, for a couple of reasons. You might say midlife crisis. I never wanted, but just to sort of give some meaning to that, I think I'd got to a point, or before that, I think probably when I was on my mid-30s, that I never wanted to be that person that sort of is perhaps frustrated when they're in their 40s, frustrated that I wasn't doing the things that I believed that my passions, wanted to live a more purposeful life, and I think that was part of why I was there. But in terms of actual reasons which put me there, I was actually going through a separation with my wife. So I was, having a bad time in terms of my personal relationship. There was clearly going to be some big change there with my partner who I'd been with for quite a big chunk of my life. And also, I was not enjoying my working life in the corporate world anymore. I worked as an analyst in London, in sort of stockbroking and wealth management area, and that was not giving me any pleasure anymore. I was kind of on a bit of a treadmill in that experience. And cut a long story short, in London, I crossed paths with somebody who had told me about the Camino de Santiago about 10 years ago. And they'd reminded me of it. They'd reminded me that there's sort of, I've forgotten about it, perhaps sort of subconsciously banked it. And they reminded me of the Camino, this journey which, is a pilgrimage, which might just help me sort of, find myself again and sort of put me on the path to living, getting over the sadness of being in a separate, getting separated and potentially a divorce, and looking for new direction in my life. So that's kind of, so just a coincidence in London, sort of a couple of other things happened. We probably don't have the time to go into that. But yes, I was reminded in a big way of this pilgrimage called the Camino de Santiago, as you say, Vitor, in Spain.
Yeah. And did you go there on your own, or was there a travel partner coming over from the UK?
No, I joined it on my own. Traveled over to Spain, and was very much committed to doing this walk, sort of a solo walk. That said, a couple of Spanish friends of mine, well, an Irish friend and his Spanish girlfriend, who live in Madrid, they actually joined me for the first 3 days of the weekend of it when I started it. So they only had time because they worked. So they sort of set me off on my way. So from Saint Jean de Pied de Port, walking for three days, up through the Pyrenees, and then into the area called Navarras. I walked with them, but then they went back to their lives in Madrid, and I carried on walking. But you're never really alone, because it's a walk of camaraderie. A lot of people started on their own, and before you know it, we're walking in the same direction to Santiago. As I say, a lot of you are on your own, so you make companions as you walk, and you've nothing else really to do apart from walking, eating, and chatting. Obviously, taking in the environment and the culture, so you soon make friends.
Is there a sense of community among the walkers?
Oh, very much so. Yes, very much so. The Camino, I say, there's the community of the villages and the towns which you pass through, and all the villages, especially more in the rural parts, because if the Camino passes through, their village, often through the center of the villages, because there'll be a church which relate to the Camino. Villagers are very proud of the history of the Camino, and so they understand the roots of it. And so there's a community in terms of the people that you meet as you pass through their villages and towns. And there's definitely a sense of community in terms of the people that you meet, because you're all walking in the same direction. You've all got stories to share, and you can't help but sort of make friends, and and a community in the sense that you help each other out. Either by listening to each other's stories, or by it's not unusual when you're walking like that, especially if you're not particularly practiced in walking long distance, that you might get injuries. So helping each other out with an injury. And then obviously a lot of people will stay in what they call the albergues, the communal hostels, and you're typically in a dormitory, and so you could end up sleeping in a bunk bed next to the person that you've been walking with for the day. So there's a real sense of community, and you eat together often, because there's as I say, there's a community along the way in terms of the towns, and they will be set up with what they call sort of a pilgrim menu for the walkers.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's too personal, but let's say when you were walking and you met other fellows on the way, were you sharing your story and listening their stories back? Were you able to tell, okay, I'm here for that purpose. There's a lot going on, my divorce and a couple of other things. Were you able to share in depth, and people were able to share back with you?
Yes, I mean, I think not to begin with. I think it's kind of a good question, because I think as you walk, you kind of get fit in terms of physical sense. Everybody had. I was perhaps I had average fitness, and I think everybody can do the walk, by the way, if they have average fitness and they don't pack too big a bag, and they're the right walking boots and things. But you get fit as you walk. So as you walk, your body gets more used to the walking. You climb a lot of hills and the odd mountain, you might say, mountainous area, and there is obviously some walking which is very flat into towns and things. So your body adjusts, you get fit, and I think also at the same time your mind adjusts. Your mind becomes a bit more aware of your environment. You become a bit clearer in your thinking, and I think being in nature a lot just sort of calms you down and sort of makes you a bit more aware of yourself and to trust a bit. And I think that's the thing. Your mind learns to trust, and so you do open up to people. It's kind of that sort of strange thing, how you can tell a stranger your life story almost, as opposed to maybe your best friend or something sometimes. So it's you do, yes. So I would say your mind becomes sort of more, I don't know if I say the right word, fit, but it's more understanding to other people's stories and sharing your own stories, for sure. And I heard many different reasons for people why they were walking. Many of
Is
their
there any you
backs.
want to share with us? Any
Oh
spicy
gosh, there
one?
were so many, but yeah, spicy stories. Gosh, I mean, there were a lot of stories, and I have to, you might come on to this later, but the fact that I was inspired to write some book, a trilogy, or one book turned into a trilogy, was inspired by some of the stories, or they sparked an idea, or or a character, or different people sort of merged into one character. So, I mean, in terms of stories of people, wow. I mean, yeah, I mean, there was one guy, and we called him Marco, who I befriended. I befriended sort of after my Irish friend and his Spanish girlfriend left me after the first 3 days when they went back to Madrid. Within a day or two, I hooked up with a group of about 6 or 7 people. 3 or 4 of them were Italian. One was French. One was Brazilian, and a couple of other people. But there was one of the Italians, Marco, who I didn't really. Everybody I clicked with, and they were very sort of, come and join us. But we slept in the same hostel, and that we were waiting outside one morning, the hostel, and I said, "Join us, walk with us." And which town are you planning to walk to today? And I was like, "Oh, this town." Well, great. We're going to walk. We're planning to walk to this town. But there was Marco, who, not that he was rude or anything, he just was sort of less receptive to me joining, it seemed, and didn't really talk so much. Although he didn't have much English, and I didn't have much Italian. Although I'd learned some Spanish, and he could communicate a little bit with sort of Spanish, because Italian speakers, are pretty good at Spanish generally. But it was hard to talk, and at first I thought it was the language barrier. I wasn't quite sure, or he just was perhaps used to the group, and he didn't want anybody else to join the group. After a few days, he got used to the people in that, and that was but I wasn't quite sure. So everybody else was fine, but I think maybe 3 or 4 days into joining the group and walking with them, I found myself at the back of the group, a bit further back with Marco, and we weren't really saying anything. But then I think what happened? Yes, we arrived at a stream, and we could hear the sort of actually it was a bridge. We could hear the water sort of gushing under the bridge, and it was very peaceful, very silent. And I think what was it? Yeah, we both heard a cuckoo, and we kind of just looked at each other, hearing the cuckoo, cuckoo kind of sound, and smiled at each other. And it was after that point that we sort of tried to communicate better, with my broken Spanish, and his better Spanish. And I don't know, it's just something that happened there. But I never then. It was after that, through sort of talking in our broken languages, and just trying harder, and other people filling the gaps with the language gaps, that we actually started to share each other's story. And I discovered that a few weeks before him making the decision to walk the Camino de Santiago, that his mother had passed away, and that was only about a month after his father had passed away. So he lost his parents within about I think so between 4 to 6 weeks. So it was very tough. And then that was at a time when he was from Abruzzo in Italy, which had suffered some earthquakes, and so his house was damaged. The foundations of his house were damaged, so that was a pretty tough period for him. And on top of that, Italy was suffering, still suffering from the financial crisis, and some parts of Italy were, and he lost his job as an electrician. So he had all these devastating things happen to him, and I think he had lost his confidence. I think he just he'd been hit by so many things, and he just became quiet. But it's funny, the more we walked, the more we tried our best to communicate and talk, and the more he engaged with other people. I just saw him it was like after maybe halfway through, a spark had sort of been lit, and he became more outgoing and passionate. And then he was always the person to offer help or smile at people and chat. And by the time we arrived, some 30 days later in Santiago de Compostela in Galicia, northwest Spain, it was like he was a different man. I remember seeing him, he sort of dropped to his knees outside the Cathedral of Santiago, which is the finishing point, and, tears in his eyes, like a lot of people, but he was just joyous. It wasn't sadness. It was just think he just let it all out. And he was very joyous, and just a completely different person from the man that I'd first experienced earlier on in the walk.
That's fantastic. The transformation that occurred in a matter of couple of weeks. That's just fantastic. And Ibadah, we need it, as you just said. But I don't want to get sidetracked here. I want to get back to your story. So, at what time you decided this is it? Was it during the Camino? Was it back to London? Was it on the flight back to the UK? At what point you made the decision to start an alternative lifestyle?
I think it was always building in me, but I just didn't know how to do it. How did I break away from the corporate world? The world in London, which paid well, which I'd invested my time in through experience and exams, and invested, going to university and getting an appropriate degree, which was in economics. But I think there was something in me which started before the Camino, really, which I think I had taken a sabbatical, actually, sort of about 6 or 7 years before I went on the Camino. I'd taken a sabbatical, and that sabbatical of a year turned into 18 months, and backpacked around South America. And I think you might say travel corrupted me, or it opened my eyes to freedom and how other cultures and other ways of living, and just the joyous experience of experiencing new countries and new places in the world. But when I came back from that, I didn't know. I was back in London. We'd rented out our apartment. Still had a mortgage to pay. So even though I'd sort of, my mind had been, it had seen so many things and given me lots of ideas, I didn't know how to sort of change my life in terms of, being able to support myself financially. And I wanted to see more of the world. So I ended up, actually, my old company offered me a job back with the company, slightly different role, but generally doing the same sort of thing, investment related work. And that was okay for a couple of years. That was okay for a couple of years because I think I sort of had new energy. I did from travel, I had new energy, and I had perhaps some wisdoms to share, or maybe when I was in a boring client meeting, or a meeting which, not that I was looking down on people, but I kind of had this sense of like, oh, I've climbed the Andes, I've climbed, I've been to Machu Picchu, I've backpacked in Colombia and the jungle and things. I had this feeling like, I've done a lot in my life. But slowly but surely, roll forward another 3 or 4 years, and I was the routine of life, right? The routine of life and the same sort of work. And I just didn't really feel I fitted into the corporate world. Really, it
Mm.
was all advantageous in terms of getting a mortgage and owning an apartment.
What
So,
was the mismatch between you and the corporate world? What was, what was wrong, like between
oh
why
yeah,
you couldn't fit in?
I think there was something in me which wanted to be more creative. There was
Mm.
something in me which wanted to, so before writing some books, and it was the Camino which sparked, just get, something, gave me the creative spark, or reminded me that there was something creative inside of me. Before writing, writing some books, because of the Camino, creative writing I'd done, or wasn't creative. The only writing I'd really done was kind of writing investment reports or client bulletins, and that was fine to begin with. When you're in a new job and a new thing, but as time rolled on, I think I had things to say. I
Yeah.
think I wanted to be more creative, and so that was when the work got repetitive, and I wanted to have the time, to free up the time, to have experience life, and to be more creative and write. And I think after traveling for 18 months in Latin America, I realized, at least for me, how to put it, you need creativity in to put creativity out in your life. And so
Yeah.
having new experiences of travel, I'm not somebody who, I don't know, who could suddenly sit down at a desk and write, boy wizard stories or something. I don't have that imagination. I need to sort of absorb life and experiences, and that's when, sort of, for me, that my ideas come. They kind of light, they sort of light something up in my mind, and I have ideas. So yeah, so I was reminded again, after sort of going traveling for 18 months, having returned for a few years, that I was stale, and I wanted something to say. And yeah, that eventually it came to a turning point, probably about 6 months before the Camino, that I quit my job again, and I
Yeah.
didn't quite know where I was going. So what I did was, I'd sort of, you might say at this point I was running away. I reverted, and this is the point where I was going through marital problems, and I went traveling again. I went back to parts of South America, and revisited some of the places, or visited some of the places I didn't get a chance to do previously. And then I went to Asia, and went to new places. But then when I returned to London, some nearly 6 months later, I didn't feel any happier in myself than I did before. I had some great experiences under my belt, but I was still had this urge to be creative, or something new. And that's when I somehow was put onto the path of the Camino. And the only thing that allowed me at that point to go traveling, having quit the well-paid job in London, was renting my flat out. So yeah.
So when you made the decision, I'm sure you shared with a couple of people, some close friends, relatives, and some people were thinking, is it a good move? Are you sure about it? I'm sure there was some backlash. That some people will tell you, yeah, it's not as simple as it seemed.
Yeah.
Did you encounter some of that, and how did you handle?
Yeah. I wouldn't call it backlash. I think maybe, I think people that are close to me knew that I wasn't happy in
Mm.
work. People knew that. It opened up, maybe not to my boss, or my general colleagues, and the fact I'd travelled for 18 months or so in the past. They kind of knew that I was, as I say, kind of had the travel bug as such. Um,
Mm.
that said, I think, at least for my father, not that he didn't say don't do this. I think he couldn't understand the sense. Well, you've got this experience, you're doing well, you've gone away once. Isn't that enough to get out of your system? And now you're about to walk away a second time. But he didn't, he wasn't like sort of angry. He just, I think, perhaps a little bit like, I could probably sense that he thought I was making mistakes. Not that he said that. And then I think, I remember thinking, one or two friends, again, they didn't directly say this, but not that they weren't supportive, that they weren't sort of gushing really enthusiastic for me, thinking, well, what are you going to do after? This is great. You've done this before. What are you going to do after, kind of thing. But I think sort of my closer friends who were in London had sort of heard me moan in the pub before, who'd heard my sort of my frustrations. So that it was a mixture, I guess, of different things. But I guess the biggest person that might have given me some backlash was sort of probably some of my own internal demons, kind of like, what if some of these people who are doubtful are right? I don't really know what I'm doing. I've got some assets in a property, but I've also got a big mortgage on it. But the rent was covering the mortgage and they're giving me extra money to kind of travel in a backpack style, sort of shoestring approach. And obviously something like the Camino across northern Spain is not an expensive thing to do.
So is it fair to say that your departure was pre-announced, that you were sending signs for a few years and at some point it just happened for good?
Yeah, I think that is fair to say. And I think the ones which were more aware or more, were in my company more, had seen the signs, that at some point I would do it again. Yeah, I probably was putting out those sort of signals. Not that I was particularly aware about it, but and of course I was going through change again in my life then, going through separation and ultimate divorce and things. So there were changes in your life and in my life that I guess I was not on a consistent path, put it that way.
Yeah.
Personally.
I think like when those feelings are that deep and profound, unless we are the discrete type, I don't know how much discrete you are, but like I can say on a personal level, I couldn't keep myself unnoticed. People will realize that something is happening, and it's just a matter of time. Like I will start to share some indications that there will be a diversion at some point. It might happen in a month, in a year, but it's about to happen because it's erupting, and you cannot just set it aside. I mean, people who know you, they can predict that there will be a next chapter along the way. It might take a couple of years, it might take less, but it's on the pipeline.
Yeah, and I think that's why when you said at the start of our conversation, transition, and you said maybe that's not the right word. I think it probably is, because it was a transition when I look back, that I'd been previously traveling independently and that had opened up a new world to me. I had gone back to work for a few years and, it re-energized me for sure. But at the same time, I was thinking, I'm not going to do this forever now, and I'm not going to, I'm in my sort of mid-30s. I'm not going to be this. I don't want to be this sort of perhaps frustrated 40-year-old. I don't know all the answers yet, but so my mind was sort of perhaps working on that. I'm probably looking ahead to like, well, how can I make some income? How can I sustain myself in living this sort of alternative lifestyle means that I can afford to do that. And I guess one of the things from backpacking previously, and one of the things you learn on the Camino for sure, when you're just carrying everything on your back in a small backpack for 30 odd days, is that you don't need as many things that you think you do. The materialistic things aren't that important when it comes down to it. I mean, and I was in a materialistic world, and a lot of people had spent them, spent bonuses and their salary on nice cars or bigger flats, or kind of how to put it, Condé Nast style holidays and things like that. And I had a nice lifestyle, but it was mainly my flat, and so I think I learned I didn't need so much stuff when I returned. And not that I've been a particularly materialistic person in the past, but I think I was able to save more money. So I was able to put more money away when I was back in the corporate world, and use that later on. So I had a bit of money to do things and put towards real estate investment, for example. So it was a transition.
Yeah. Talking of material things, there's one thing that I think we all need. It can get different shapes and forms, which is our pillow. We all need a pillow to sleep. So do you remember your first night after leaving for good, when you hit the pillow and say, okay, I'm going to sleep, and from tomorrow onwards my life will be radically different? So how was your headspace when you hit that pillow on the first night?
So the first night when I made the decision, you mean, or the first night when I was
Well, let's say both. Let's say both. Yes. Yeah, let's say both.
Okay. Oh, good God! I just let me think back now, because it's kind of over 10 years ago, really. I guess I've been on this journey. So, oh gosh. Well, I can tell you. I can tell. I can tell you. I remember very clearly my first night, about to start the Camino de Santiago. So the first night, well, I've rented out my flat in London again. I've arrived by plane and train to Saint Jean de Pied de Port in the late afternoon, ready to get up at sort of 5 or 6 the next morning to walk the Camino de Santiago. And I was in a dormitory with about 50 people. I'm quite a light sleeper, and so I felt like I was in the right place. I felt I was in the right place. But when my head hit the pillow, I didn't sleep particularly well, because it was noisy in there. People were snoring, or I was in an unfamiliar environment. And I think the pressure, when you've got to do something big the next day, then when you have to get up early, you start thinking about it. And the other mistake I made, you learn all these tricks of, preparation and things to do when they're walking. I had earplugs, but they were in my backpack, and I was on the top bunk, and that was in my backpack underneath the bottom bunk. And so and it was just to get out of the sleeping bag and go down the bunks and disturb the person underneath me, and in the dark, because it's lights out after 10 p.m. typically in the dormitories. It would just been a lot of hassle. So I sort of suffered not sleeping well. The next morning I was in a bit of a fog, a bit of a daze. But it's funny, because that was the start. It was the right thing, and I didn't feel anxiety about. I think I was sort of unable to sleep that well for those reasons. But as soon as the first days are one of the hardest days on the Camino, and especially as a lot of people aren't fit at that point. You climb up over the Pyrenees and into Spain, into a sort of monastery little town called Roncesvalles, and it's a hard climb. You're climbing up and up and up. It's about 5 or 6 hours of walking. Not everybody makes it, because they're just not prepared, or their backpack's too big, or they haven't walked in their walking boots and things like that. It was a hard slog up there, but you know what? I was determined. I knew this was the right path. I knew very much so that I would be getting to the monastery where everybody generally stays at the end of the day, at the top, just over the border into Spain, into Roncesvalles. And being, a British guy, I knew there would be a beer waiting for me at the end of the day when I arrived there. So yeah. So it's a strange one. My head hit the pillow, but I didn't sleep, but I knew I was on the right path.
Yeah, that's what matters. What about the first week after you left the corporate world? Were you more the worried type, or there was a sense of release that made every single day festive?
I think to begin with, yes, it was all, I've done the right thing. I've kind of burned my bridges, because this is the second time that I've left the corporate world, if you include the sabbatical 18-month period. So it's the second time. So my CV is now going to look quite thin, with gaps. And I felt very positive about it, especially now. It felt right that I was going to the Camino de Santiago. I didn't know it at the time, but I did subsequently find out it was the right path to put me on, because it set me off in a new journey, a new chapter in my life. And I felt positive about that for sure. I think it's only later, because you're on a new journey. No journey is smooth. There's different choices, there's different paths, there's different challenges. So there were subsequently doubts come in again, and I think you have to sort of remind yourself, or kind of renew your boots as such, and take other little mini journeys to sort of remind yourself why you're on this bigger journey.
Yeah. So let's say there's someone listening to us and they are hesitant about making the move.
Yes.
they think is the right thing to do, but there is, as you said, there are some demons telling them maybe
Yeah.
it's better to wait 1 year, maybe you need to build a few assets, maybe you are not capable to embody that lifestyle, but they think that they should go ahead, but somehow they cannot. So how would you encourage them to go ahead generically? Because I know like people have different circumstances, but
Yeah.
let's say on a general basis, how would you tell them take that step because it will make sense for you?
Yeah, I mean, on a general basis, if we're assuming that they've saved up for money to do this, so that they're not going to be sort of on the streets or something, and assuming that yes, as you say, for a long time they've been wanting to do this, but they just haven't had that, they haven't been whatever the courage, you might say, to do it
Yeah,
because of the demons and the doubts. Assuming all that, and assuming they've got skills, there's a plan. There's a plan B. What's your plan B if it all doesn't work out? Can you go back to work if you've just you give it 6 months? Yeah. Is there a plan B? Can you do something else? Are you resourceful? So assuming all of that, do you know what I think I would say? I would say to them, barring any significant problem in your life, such as an illness or maybe a big family bereavement, somebody in your family has passed away unexpectedly. So failing some big sort of trauma or tragedy in your life, um, I can pretty much guarantee if you don't go on this journey now, in 12 months' time, your life is going to look exactly the same as it does now, if that makes any sense.
yeah, 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 100%, 100%. I think
Mm,
most people will relate to that because, like, they are, if they feel miserable, they need to make a change.
yes,
Maybe it's not pursuing an alternative lifestyle, but there is some risk to be taken. They need to somehow um, pursue a path that they haven't and see what happens. Of course, there's a lot to fear, but also you need to face that fear. Otherwise, you remain miserable. So I think, as they say, no pain, no gain.
exactly. Yes, and there's only so long that the pain is the suffering of not making the change. If you really
Yeah,
feel there's something to do, it's a bit like I remember someone saying to me, it's a bit like when I don't know, you get a little stone in your shoe and it's aggravating and annoying, but you keep walking with it. You keep walking because I don't know, you feel like you're in a rush, or oh, it's not, it's just it's a little aggravation, but I've got to get ahead, and you don't stop for just 2 minutes to undo your shoe and shake that stone out. But eventually, that aggravation, if you don't do something about it, that turns into a blister, and maybe that
yeah.
blister becomes infected. And I think that's sort of yourself. If you're not happy with something, maybe eventually you get ill if you don't follow that calling.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Mm.
So I think it's fair to say that is a process. You cannot just jump
Yeah,
off the cliff. You need to have some vision and maybe spend some time thinking, okay, I have these skills I can apply in that sector, which I can relate to. I'm good at it, so maybe I can give it a try. So, and I think one thing that people should take in consideration, or no, people should not take in consideration, better said, is not listen to a lot of gurus on what's on YouTube who say you just quit the job and you'll be fine. Like they need to assess first their situation because everyone's life is different, and maybe others have a network that they don't. So it's always, I think it's also good to know someone who can give you a hand if you don't know what to do next.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think jumping off that cliff might work for say 1 in 1,000 people who get
Yeah,
lucky, or they've worked it all out. But I think generally you've got a plan, you've got a transition, and that's my story. I did it might look to some people I've kind of just leapt, like I'm sort of going on a sabbatical. But hey, going back to that time when I'm on a sabbatical, there was a pretty good chance that it was seen as sabbatical. I could go back into the working world after that.
mm,
But that was a transition because then my eyes were open to travel and sort of independent travel. I went back to the working world, for a few years, but I guess I sort of tested things, and no, really, it was good for a period, but ultimately I wasn't happy. So it was a kind of
mm,
a testing ground again. But also it gave me the opportunity to save some more money, perhaps become a bit clearer. about things. And also when I traveled previously, I didn't have a blog, but I was sort of sending emails to friends and work colleagues and things, and they were enjoying the emails. They were enjoying the place I've been to and the sort of description. So I'd already started to discover that I enjoyed this sort of what you might call blogging, even though I didn't have a blog then. So that's a new learning as well. And then that said, when I went on the Camino and did that for just over a month, and then some of the Italian friends I met invited me to Italy, so I spent some time in Italy, and then I did a bit more travels in Europe. And then I came back to London. I was like, okay, yeah, I want to travel more. I want to I want to see where I can go with these books. I had one story idea, and I had some time, and I had some savings, so I could take a bit of time back in London. And I stayed at a friend's place, so I wasn't paying really much rent, and I was working on the books. And then there was more transition because the book came out, and the first one did did better than I expected. So that gave me more confidence to then, okay, then people wanted to know what happens next in this story. I thought I'd finish off the story, but people loved the character. They wanted to know next. So that was a stepping stone. And then I did some public speaking about the book and the Camino. So these are all new things I was gaining. But mixed in with all of that, once I was back in London for sort of 6 months or so, okay, I'm getting through my savings. I moved back into my apartment, so I was no longer getting the rent from the apartment. Okay, well, what do I do now? I don't have the rent, my savings, the sales from the book were sort of fading off. Okay, I can write another book. But that's going to take another few years, and that's what took me back to Spain and researching the Camino in more depth, other Camino walks. Well, I don't want to return to full time to permanent work, so I did some consultancy work. I still knew people in the industry. I worked on a more flexible basis, but from home. Sometimes had to go into their offices and things, and so consultancy, sort of contractual basis, part time, which gave. But I could do that from different places. I took some of the work to Mexico, for example. I was in Mexico, and working remotely, and this is before the pandemic and things, but sort of there are a lot of people doing that by that point, but it was like I can do this with the kind of consultancy of work I've got. And so yes, it was a transition, it was steps. And then I think now I look back in the last sort of 10 years or so, I had the confidence to take more risk, you might say, but educated risk. Having let out my property when I was away, I felt more confident with renting and things like that. So I managed to get a couple of big mortgages and refurbish a couple of properties and sort of rent them out on Airbnb and that sort of thing. So a bit of real estate, nothing massive, but enough for me with my income requirements, which weren't particularly big. I haven't got children, so that's a different sort of situation to some people, who are middle-aged. So I didn't have the sort of outgoings of kids. But I found a way, but it was definitely in steps, kind of a bit of real estate, a bit of the income from the books. And I wrote a few articles. Part of the contract was writing, but writing sort of a couple of travel blogs or travel pieces, and also some investment pieces, because that's my sort of career background. So it definitely was in a transition. And now I'm at the point where I still don't have a massive income, you might say, but I have a home now in Bristol without a mortgage. So I've got to the point now, because of that, with the bit of real estate, that it's just this one property, but I don't have a mortgage on it.
Yeah, I would say that many people, they have to choose between having a well-paid job or having a home without a mortgage. They might
Yes.
well go to the home without a mortgage.
Well, yes, I think you're right. Absolutely, it's sacrifices and choices and compromises, and and I feel very privileged. Sort of still I'm far from what you might call typical retirement age, but to have a home without a mortgage, so that gives me now leverage. I would say, if I want to, when I go off traveling and things like that. So this home is just coming up for a year old. We've been doing it up. Me and my new partner, Mark, working on this property for nearly a year, and so having had the experience of doing a bit of real estate, and the great thing about doing a property, but I have the flexibility of that, so
Mm.
I can take maybe a few days off and get away in our camper van, for example, and things. So yeah, this is so it's a home at the moment, which is nearly finished in terms of doing it up, but it's also it's um, it's an investment which enables me to travel because I can quite easily rent it out, and I don't have to worry about children, where they're going to live, and kids at school and things. So it is, yeah, as you suggested, it's a sort of a choice in terms of paying off the mortgage or living a certain lifestyle, etc.
Because at least there is freedom in the well-paid job. There isn't. I mean, there's the income, which is great, but that's
Mhm.
it. With the home, without a mortgage, there is so much space and exploration that you can take advantage of, which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean, of course, with a home, especially these days with utility bills and electricity
Yeah.
and gas, we still have the bills and the council rates and all the bills of internet and utilities. But the biggest part of the bill, which anyone has, is rent or the mortgage. So that takes the pressure off massively. That every month I have to make sure I've got that mortgage, as you could lose your house. So that takes the pressure off. And I've even done some things which um, helping out, a bit of labouring or garden work and things like that now and again, which just kind of like gets me outside. And if you suddenly earn £100 a day or something doing that kind of work, that's actually quite meaningful money when you don't have a mortgage or you're not, you
Yes.
don't have massive outgoings.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how old were you when you left the corporate world for good?
Let me think now. So 2012, I was just coming up to 40. So I think, and actually I think I'd hit 40, yeah, about 40. So yeah, sort of typical
About
what you
40.
might say middle age, about 40.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm now 52. So that was about 12 years ago. And I say in that period, I've done a bit of consultancy work within the industry. And I actually did go back to work for 2 years, that said, but only part-time for 3 days a week. And that kind of worked out because that was during the sort of stay-at-home period.
Mm.
And you couldn't really do much then or travel much. But when it was time to go back to the office, I quit that job again. So that worked out quite well. So I was lucky that somebody needed some extra resource, and they reached out to me. It was sort of unexpected, and I thought, well, things are looking uncertain in terms of travel. And it looks like I'm going to be stuck at home. I don't know for how long, but yeah. So that worked out. That worked out well. So I did do that, but that was sort of part time, as I say, for 2 years. And so I did. You could say I dipped back in. So and that's why I think you were very clear. Very on the money in terms of transition. I think it is a transition, and that's how it has been for me. But now, with all these experiences. And when working on a fourth book now, and these experiences, it's taken me. I guess you might say, I almost needed this time to become very clear and confident in this journey and this sort of new lifestyle, and refining along the way how I sort of take my creativity. And so the next thing for me is, I haven't started this, but I'm just sort of thinking about this in terms, sort of not too dissimilar to you in a way. Obviously, this is a sort of YouTube podcast. You might say it's actually sort of YouTube in my travel experiences.
Yeah.
But I'm still sort of refining the idea in my mind. But I think and this is actually the first time, apart from Emma, my partner, that I've mentioned it to anyone really. So it's work in progress. So I don't want to be like you might call a typical vlog. I want to sort of perhaps show people much more depth into culture, introducing people to places that might not off the beaten track, but they wouldn't think to go to. Then maybe the government or the media has given a bad name or a bad rap to a place, and kind of discouraged people to go there. As I found through traveling, I've been to over, I think last count is 52 different countries I've been to. The reality is often different to the
Yeah.
news, often different. to the a Western viewpoint, a sort of places which are taboo often for political reasons, and whereas the people are much different to the politicians or the perception that you're given. So I want to do something like that, which perhaps opens people's eyes to one places which that I don't know, just coming on like Iran, maybe. I'm sure Iran, if from an American's perspective, Iran might not be a good place to go to, and I think actually it's quite difficult for Americans to go to Iran unless they're on a sort of a group trip as such, an organized trip. But as I think that as I found that the people in Iran are probably going to be much different to the politicians, and people are people. So that's just doesn't mean I'm going to go. That just came to mind now. Or maybe plus showing people that you can travel to different destinations. I backpacked around Colombia, and it was. There's some places in Colombia you wouldn't go to, but also there's places which were fine and open, were amazing experiences. And it's a lot about, just talking to locals and listening to what they have to say and following their advice. So that's kind of a sort of idea that it would be a kind of have to learn editing skills and sound and video and camera work, but something like that. But I don't want it to be very glossy, a little bit more raw, sort of more of like pro or something like that. So not putting a glossy side on things like so that's kind of, but I think my ideas have been refined to that now, and so it has been a journey of, okay, what is it in terms of my ability to tell a story, how do I think that will best be told? And I think it's what I realize is it's other people's stories, just like I said on the Camino. When you're walking on the Camino, it's sharing other people's stories and other places which you're less familiar with, but with obviously through my eyes, my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I fully relate to that. I was actually as a guest in a podcast. Actually, it's a British podcast from a guy based in Coventry. His podcast is called Roadwide Travel Podcast. I will send it to you by private message. Maybe you can be a guest one of these days. They're looking for people, and I think there is a match between you and him.
Thanks.
So his podcast is all about dismantling myths. Like exactly what you said. That we were told to avoid certain areas of the road, and once you go there, they are radically different from what we were told, and that's exactly his mission. So I think you'll have a lot of says for that.
That's interesting. So I think that's there's lots of narratives in the world we live in, and that and as well as travel and places which you're sort of told forbidden to go to, and often that's just a narrative made up by other people, which is not and is not the reality.
Yeah, 100%. But let me just stay on your story. So when you quit for good, was there any moment that you thought, oh, this feels great, this is the right thing, I wish I would have taken the decision earlier? Because I think it's very common when people realize that they are going on the right direction and they have been thinking about for a while, then they think, okay, great that I'm here now, but it would be even better if I would be in this path for, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years.
How would I put it? I think in terms of my journey, it was the sort of the right, it was the right time and the right path, because I did sort of, when I was ready to go and take a sabbatical, I did that, and then I came back and sort of with slightly re-energized and changed in that sense. So for me, it helped me build up some money, of course, working, and some assets. So it wasn't like I was taking a crazy leap or a dive that could, if it didn't work out, could sort of be damaging for me. That said, I wish now, and I look back, that I'd actually picked up some more practical skills. If I'd known that I was going to travel more and do things, if I'd had some more practical skills, like, I don't know, construction work or plumbing or different things, I could have worked my way around the world as well and earned quite good money. And I think so when I look back on sort of my journey, I wish I developed some more practical skills. I think, and it's funny because I think I've been reminded of that more recently, sort of doing up this house here and stuff. That the real benefits of having some practical skills, and the corporate world, of course. And I work quite long hours that it meant that I didn't really have much time to develop other skills really, and I'd pay for somebody to do work on my property or decorate it and things like that then. So that's sort of how I would answer that. I wish and I think practical skills often are just having a bit of courage in yourself and being the willing to try something different or experiment, and so that's how I would put it.
Is there anything you miss from the corporate world?
The money? I'm joking. Right?
Yeah, it was the obvious one. I didn't want to mention it.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah, I'm
Other than
joking.
that,
Do you know what? I don't really think about that. No, I don't think about that. I guess the one thing maybe I might say is the daily sort of camaraderie of a familiar face of people, which your colleagues who you get on with, and you sort of that teamwork and I was lucky. I had a pretty good team that I was in for the job I had the longest, and that sort of just daily banter and sort of teamwork. But I don't really miss that much about it, to tell you the truth. I don't think about it. It's I just think if I think about it, it's just some of the funny events that happened or certain memorable things. Just sort of the daily sort of team sort of thing. But I've got enough to do outside of with travel and writing and other things and doing that. It's not like I sort of think about or dwell on that too much.
yeah. And what's the thing that you don't miss at all?
The hours, getting up early. It's a long day. Like in any job, it's a lot of your hours are taken up with doing something which you don't particularly that doesn't inspire you. I typically worked about sort of 8:30 to 6:37, 5 days a week. Coming up to the end of the tax year, I'd work Saturday mornings. The hours, and within that, I guess the main thing is that when you work fairly long hours, when you go home, you don't have much energy left to be creative. There's not much left to do apart from just watch a film on Netflix or something, or go down the pub, which is very much a British culture, British and Irish culture, as to unwind, and you do that with your work colleagues, especially in the summer and things. I don't. I'm very lucky now to be able to sort of plan my time better and do things which sort of fill me up as opposed to sort of drain my energy.
Yeah, 100%. And so that thing that you just mentioned, the pub one, I can share a personal experience. Like if I'm seated in an office for, let's say, 8 hours, after all I want is head to the pub, because you need to get that balance. I mean, of course, in Ireland they're in every corner. But even if they aren't, I would just get on a taxi and find myself in the pub as soon as possible. I think there is this urge to try to get some dopamine, and the pub offers that. But if I'm seated at home for the day, I don't mind. I don't need that pub. I'm happy to go to a pub, say, once a week, but it's not an urge. It's just a pleasure. It's not a necessity, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it's kind of, as you say, to get that sort of dopamine kind of hit. And you think that's the only way to do that, because it's the British and the Irish culture. When you're in you're in a crowd, and then everybody's going to the pub after, and they're encouraging to join them, and it's too easy, as opposed to you having to step back and actually say, okay, what is it actually gives me pleasure? What is it that can do? And I think, like you say, when you're working on something that really sort of raises your energy, really inspires you. Yeah. Not that I go like you, not that I don't go to the pub now and again, and I do, because I still, I'm currently based in the UK. That said, it's more like actual fact. You know what? I'm at home. I don't feel like, oh, I've had a good day writing or doing something. Maybe I would just have the pleasure of one glass of wine or something and actually appreciate that glass of wine. And it's a wine I've spent a bit more money on, but I'm going to enjoy that glass of wine. Um, yeah, it's interesting because when you travel and stuff, it's the same thing. If you're moving around, you've got different experiences. You're trying different foods. You're not necessarily drinking, but you're dipping
Mhm.
into sort of new things which really raise your energy levels. So yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Another thing is about being being out and about. Like if you are seated in an office, as you said, for the most part, all we want to do is go to the pub or go home. There's no option C. And when you are home based, it feels great to be out. It feels even that the surroundings are more beautiful, even if the day is gray or the weather is not that appealing. Doesn't matter. Just the fact of being out, it's already positive. So I think there is a massive benefit of being home based because the time that you spend out, it's better spent.
Yes, yeah, I think for sure. And I think the one thing that I would add, just being at home, it's also sort of reminding yourself actually though to like get up and go out in the garden or go to
Mm.
the local park or do some things like that because those are the times when you actually really appreciate it. You appreciate um, that space and environment. I think in a big way.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. You mentioned in one of your posts, I think it was Instagram, if I recall well, that you are still very busy, but now it's different because you can define your working hours. So is it about being your own boss that changes the whole picture?
I think so. Yes, I think. Yeah, if I not that I make a habit of getting up really late, but if I've had I don't know, I've been away walking or something, and it's been a really tiring weekend. I don't have to. I can just get up when I wake up, and just do what I need to do, and I'll typically work a bit later on that kind of day, um, or maybe I'll take a day off to do something, but then I'll just catch up at the weekend or something. So I think being able to set your hours and also working out how what works best for you. Are you a morning person? Are you someone
Mhm.
that sort of works better later in the day? With me, typically, I find I don't actually do. I get up and I don't actually do any work for a couple of hours. In the traditional sense, I'll get up. I'll probably have at least half an hour just drinking my coffee, a couple of cups of coffee, and just thinking about things and maybe just making some notes of the stuff that I want to do, sort of downloading out of my head tasks and things. And so then it's out of my head initially, and thinking, okay, so what's the first thing I'm going to do today? And then normally I would do just a little bit of exercise or stretches, and I will go for a walk. Or if I don't go for a walk, I'll do I don't know something like skipping in the back garden or something, or
Mm.
just some things to get myself going. So I don't actually start going until maybe about 9:30, 10 o'clock, because I found for me that works better. That I'm not someone that when I wake up, I just wake up like that. I kind of ease myself. It takes me a few hours to wake up, and I always joke with people. I always joke that if you want a favor from me, don't ask for a favor before 11 a.m. and I've had 2 cups of coffee.
Well, on
Yeah.
that note, we are the opposite. I'm a morning person. Like I do
Yeah.
most of the stuff till lunchtime, and then I
Yeah.
start to take it easy, and then I erupt again for the podcast around this time of the evening between 6 and 8. But I need to slow down for the afternoon. Like I'm way more useful if I can be useful during the morning. That's
Yeah.
really like I like to be fresh, and
Yeah.
what is very helpful for me is to uh, work out straight after I wake up. Let's say in 10,
Yeah.
20 minutes, I'm exercising. It can be in the gym, it can be just jogging in the park, but that boost will make a massive difference for the
Mhm.
rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember somebody saying once 1 hour in the morning is worth two in the afternoon. But I think, yeah, I'm not like I'm a morning-ish person, but I'm not sort of like yourself, quite early. I
Mm.
think that's interesting when you can work out what works better for you because in the typical working 9 to 5,
Yeah.
corporate world, your hours are set for you. Whoever, it's set, and you have no choice. And so, you don't have that flexibility to work out, like you say, okay, you're going to go really hard in the morning, and then you ease off a bit in the afternoon until later in the day when you go back to your podcasting work and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think that's what I meant by that post, is that you can set your own hours, and then you work out what works best for you. I remember reading something about Mark Zuckerberg, for example, that he didn't even get up to midday, because he would work late. He would work, I don't know if this now, but in the past, I think, in the earlier days of Facebook, he would not even show his face till about 2:00 in the afternoon at the Facebook offices, because I think he worked in the night. He worked through. He was used as a programmer sometimes to working late at night and that sort of thing, and going to bed late. And so then he'd get up at midday, but look, he's look at his worth. Look at Facebook. So
yeah, that's what I want to say. It went well for him. So
yes, so I think it's working out what's best for you. And obviously, when you work for yourself, or you can set your hours which best suit you.
Yeah,
And that's,
exactly.
of course, some work. It depends what the work is. Of course, there might be clients
Yeah.
that you have to deal with in the morning and things like that. It depends on the work, of course. And everybody has that. For me, with the way I am, with a bit of real estate, in terms of I can unless I've got an electrician coming and or someone coming in or something like that.
Can we say that if you want to work for yourself, you need a significant degree of self-awareness?
Yeah, self-awareness, discipline, of course. You still need the discipline, because there's things which you might not want to do, but you need to do, and you don't have a boss hanging over you that, So self-awareness, sure, and I think we've touched on that. And I think, again, self-aware, I would say structure, but that comes from self-awareness. I've worked out that I need an element of structure, so even having the coffee in the morning and writing down what I'm going to do for the day is some kind of structure and order, because I'm just sort of downloading out of my head what I need to do. I was thinking I was going to say structure, but no, I think the structure for me has come from self-awareness, that I need some kind of structure. Setting some deadlines for yourself, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Let's talk travel for the last, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes of this conversation. Right. So you've been to 52 countries, which I think it's a good number, 52, it's not small. So you may have some favorite destinations. Is there any 2 or 3 you want to name and provide us the rationale?
Oh, it's such a hard question, because I'm always so influenced by the last place I've been to. But thinking about, I guess I do have having backpacked around Latin America for 18 months. I still have a sort of a strong love of Latin America and Latin American culture. And of course, Spain, ties into Latin America in a big way, having, been in Spain quite a lot. And after backpacking around Latin America, and that's where a lot of the 52 countries come from, because I've visited, a good chunk of the countries in Central America and South America, so that they add up when you visit those continents. I did find myself returning to South America quite a lot, and especially Colombia. I spent nearly 3 months in Colombia in the back with the backpacking, the first trip, and I've been back to Colombia 3 or 4 times since. I made a good friend over there, an American friend, who set up a hostel. So I'd always go back and stay with him in the city of Cali, which is the capital of salsa. If anyone knows Colombia, it's salsa dancing, and salsa kind of burst out of Cali in the sort of 50s and 60s. So I found myself going back there, because I think Colombia is the thing I like about Colombia is it has a lot of, it's very diverse. You have the sort of the Caribbean coast. You have the coffee zone with some brilliant trekking and the coffee culture. You have some cosmopolitan cities in Medellin, for example, and Bogota is rich in history and colonial architecture. There's a wide variety there, and of different parts to the country. Plus the people are very friendly, and they're very, sort of fiesta party type people with the salsa. They're very friendly, fun people. So Colombia for sure. And as I think there's a lot you can do in Colombia. And I think, since I first went there in 2007, I think was the first time I went, it's a lot more travel. It was quite travel friendly then for the backpacker, but I think since then a lot more people go there, aren't put off by government warnings, and things. And subsequently, the civil wars ended. That has subsequently happened since. Colombia, Mexico. So going back, to Latin America, Mexico, I've been to 4 or 5 times now. I love, again, it's a fantastic country. The people are so warm. The food's amazing, really good, and a lot, there's different parts to it in terms of the coastal regions. And Mexico City is an amazing capital, very diverse city, very diverse. It's some of it's very gentrified, some of it is definitely rough around the edges, but there's a very strong feeling of Mexico and culture in Mexico City. And I'd say the third place would have to be Spain, because I think that's where my books are set. I've been back there a lot. It's the culture of family there is very strong. I suspect not too different to Portugal in that sense, in terms of family and friendship and fun. And the food, for me, I love the food.
Yeah. Any non-Spanish speaking country? Just to have something different on the plate.
Yes, let me think. What has been a country that I've loved that was a little bit different and not non-Spanish speaking? That's a good question. I mean, I've traveled quite a bit in Asia. I think India. I would say India is. I think. How would I put it? I thought I was a sort of an experienced independent backpacker until I went to India, and that was a whole nother level of travel and backpacking in terms of traveling independently. It was hard at times. It was challenging, but at the same time, it was so rich. There was so much to see and do, and it's a very regional country, very different in a lot of the different, especially the north compared to the south. Every day is interesting. Every day is noisy and loud and unexpected if you're in one of the major cities. Or you just learn a lot as well. You learn a lot, and so I've been talking about a Spanish-speaking country. I'd spent a month in Cuba in the past, and that was quite an interesting place to visit independently. But then you go to somewhere like India, and it's just all your senses are alert. Whether it's the food, the smells of a city, the colors, everything's kind of. Yeah. And so I would say, you haven't backpacked until you've been to India, and just like riding the trains and getting your head around the timetables and why a train is not moving for 12 hours and you're stuck on a train, and then arriving in the middle of the night somewhere and there's nowhere to stay. It's a challenge, but it's a real experience. And of course, there's lots of different languages in India, obviously, in terms of the different dialects and languages across the country.
So a good chunk of your books are based or inspired in your travel. Do you write while you are traveling, or you need to be back home and sit down in a quiet place to put the words on paper?
That's a good question. What the Camino actually sort of taught me my style of writing in a way, because I had a journal, and every day, whilst I was on the Camino, at the end of the day, I would just put some notes into my journal, and just about the day, maybe the people I'd met, and so I did that for 30 days of walking or so. And by the end of that journey, my journal was very rich. I had a lot of different things, whether it's just the weather that day, or what was the landscape, or was there an interesting experience or person I met. So I discovered for myself that keeping notes, keeping a journal when I travel, I might not necessarily refer to those notes again at the time, but then subsequently when I've returned home or or I'm staying in a place where I've got just time to stop and reflect and maybe write, I've often dipped into those notes. And that's what happened with my first book, Candy Floss Guitar, which was set on the Camino. I dipped into those notes, and it kind of reminded me of the place I'd been, the people I'd met. And so that's one technique is yeah, I do keep notes and a journal when I travel. And the other thing is photographs. Going into your photographs, taking more photographs, maybe, or something that doesn't necessarily look particularly scenic, etc. But it will spark a memory or give an idea or create a sense of place, which is always important when you're setting a book in a particular sort of culture or place. So yeah, I definitely do that note taking along the way, and then when I'm writing, I often refer to those notes.
Yeah, I would relate to that. Like I would take notes or at least have some material that I can write to later on. And then when I have the proper setup that I can expand and develop my ideas, I would come up with a final version. But it's essential to pick some writing or, as I said, photographs, just to collect some material that you can use later on when you have the right surroundings. And then that's home for me.
I agree. That's what works for me. Yes, for sure. It sparks off the imagination, and yeah, can take you back to that place. Am I right?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, am I writing? Whilst those 3 books are fictional, they are very much the towns that are in the book are real towns. The places you travel are real towns. I mean, maybe a bar or a certain place is fictional, and the people are fictional. They're kind of a fusion of different characters or that have developed from the people I've met. So it's a kind of linear A to B to C kind of story in the way. Obviously, you have the highs and lows to make for drama and for storytelling, but that's definitely my style of writing. So there's probably no surprise that I've tried blogging and things like that. And now I'm thinking about my own spin on a sort of YouTube travel video series.
Yeah, I want to ask about next project, but I think you already answered my question with that.
Yeah, so I wasn't deliberately doing self-promotion, but it was kind of it's just, I think it's part of the process. I have now become a lot more refined in my mind, after I'd say 10 years of this kind of lifestyle generally, that where I am, it's like, okay, maybe like I'm talking about a normal career. After, you start off learning a job, and then you maybe try a few other things, and you find out within a certain industry what works best for you. You pick up skills, and then maybe you might go off at a tangent slightly, but maybe after 10 years of I notice you're a football fan, and a footballer doesn't really peak until they're about sort of 27, 28. After 10 years as a professional footballer, then you start to peak. And maybe that's just where I found that I'm starting to peak now in terms of what is it that really drives me, and where can my creative storytelling skills be most effective. And if it wasn't for going on this journey, I would never have got to this point.
Yeah. Any travel in the pipeline?
Some ideas, yeah, some ideas. So this house will be finished, in the next few months now, and me and my wife, we're throwing some ideas about, and she loves to travel. She's lived in France, and she's lived in the Balkans. She's Scottish, but she's lived overseas and worked in the Balkans. So, in actual fact, one of her dreams was to have a bookshop and cafe in London. And I met her because of my first book. I was invited to do a reading and a talk about the Camino in my book, and it was in her bookshop, and that's how I met her. And her bookshop tended to specialize in travel guides, culture, travel books, fiction books, fiction, of course, and other genre books, but it had a focus that area. And so yet she has the sort of the urge to travel. So problem is sometimes that we have too many places that we want to go to, and it's just working that out. But she's sort of adjusted her lifestyle similarly to me. but we recently got married, so we haven't had the official honeymoon yet. So and we're going to do that in the summer. So it might be a sort of a combination of you might say a honeymoon, but traveling sort of independently. But Japan is one place that we both haven't been to that have come up on the radar. Japan is a place. I would like to return to Cuba. As I say, I've been there once, but we both love music and the music there. Maybe the Caribbean, but sort of island hopping a little bit in the Caribbean, but not in some exotic sort of cruise way, but independently, taking the local ferries and things. Yeah, but that would be a great opportunity obviously to develop the my YouTube channel as well at the same time.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was thinking. If you go to Japan or or Cuba as a honeymoon, but not a traditional one, more down to earth kind of thing, I think you can collect a lot of material for that vlog. I think it's a fantastic starting point.
I think so, and that's sort of my thinking. I just have to sort of persuade Emma to that thinking that there'll be a bit of sort of it'll be a bit alternative, but she's very relaxed about that. It's just working out. It's that sort of thing like Japan. We both haven't been to Japan, and we love to travel, so it makes a lot of sense. But Japan isn't the cheapest of places to go to, I'm told. Tokyo won't be, but also we've learned how to travel where in a sense where we don't spend as much money as maybe the average tourist might. We love walking. Then there's no cost in walking or hiking and things. And we think when you're curious, you have a habit of meeting locals and having different experiences as well. I mean, one of my favorite things of doing especially when I backpacked in Latin America, the first thing that I would do, arrive in a new place, if it was a town or a city, just take oneself to the actual main plaza, the main square, and not ever have any plans apart from sit there, have a coffee or a beer, depending on the day, and just get chatting to some people. And then before you know
Yeah.
it, you've got some insiders tips, you've got some locals tips, and you're not going to that museum or you're not going to that cathedral or whatever. Not to say I don't do some of those things sometimes, but it's just always my favorite thing is just to plant yourself right in the heart of the city in the main square in a cafe or a bar and just see if you end up chatting to a local.
Yeah, I would relate to that 100%. That's one of the things. I remember what was the second trip I did with my girlfriend. We were in La Manga in Spain, which
Okay.
is southeast, and I just told her I want to sit just to try to listen what the locals are talking about. And I speak Spanish, so I could.
Yeah, so for you it's very easy. Yes.
Yeah, I could understand 100% what they were saying. And even if I don't speak the language, sometimes I like to be in the middle of them, just try to guess or try to, I don't know, fantasize with their own language. It's a journey of itself, and it feels good to feel foreign. Just okay, here's where people gather. I'm not one of them, but I'm here anyway, and I wanna perceive the vibe. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's the moment, it's people, it's the vibe, as you say. You can never find that in a. I don't want to be rude about museums, but just if you think about a traditional museum, a stuffy museum, which is everything from the past and is
Yeah.
useful, but it doesn't tell you anything about now and the people. How are they living now? What is the vibe? What is it that is upsetting them, or what is it that makes them come alive about a place? A museum can't tell you that. It's for me, it's always people in the people in their environment.
In terms of writing, are you working on anything at the moment, or are you waiting to start traveling again to come up with another project?
It's a bit of both, So I've just started thinking about, as I say, this YouTube travel channel. I've been thinking about that. I've just set up a Substack, but I haven't really got very far with Substack. But I think that would be
Check it
a
out.
nice. Yeah, I think that would be useful to have that focus of regularly writing a newsletter. I've got quite a few people on my newsletter, which I've transferred over to Substack now for my author's newsletter. But I haven't really, as I say, I haven't got going on that yet. But I am working on a book in the background. I'm sort of working like probably every other day, a few hours in the morning on a new fictional story, which again came about because of an experience of getting out there and doing things. And this idea came to me from spending 5 days in the woods in Dartmoor in Devon Devon in England, just camping and some walking and things, and camping there and being there last autumn, and it just kind of sparked my imagination with a story. So this is going to be sort of a short, no, not I say short, so a novella size, maybe 100 pages. So I'm working on that, and I'll just see what happens with that. I'll just put it out there, let my readership know, and see what happens with that one. So so that's something which no particular deadline. Working on that, 2 or 3 days a week. But the YouTube thing is the thing which has really got my imagination, because we're obviously both travelers, we're curious, and I think that's where I've really worked out in terms of my approach to travel. It's sharing off the beaten track or off the beaten ideas about a place, and sort of throwing light onto places where people would never really consider or had preconceived ideas about.
Yeah, I personally think that they have a lot to deliver on the YouTube side of the house. It's a complete different monster from writing, but it helps that you are used to create and share your stories and what happened to you on a daily basis. So I think, I think it's just a matter of adjusting the communication method, and then it will work out pretty well. But at the beginning, it's kind of weird because you get reactions on real time, which with books is different. Like you need to wait for the person to buy the book, read it, and send you an email or write a comment on your social media. On YouTube, is happening. It's just happening. It's it's in real time. That's the thing.
It's going to be different for sure. I guess the thing, my fear is, I still have, of course, we all have fears when you're treading into the unknown and going to something new. My fear is like, the technical skills you need to learn, editing and shooting and getting the sound right, all those sort of things. But there are fears, but also I think because of the journey I've gone on, I know in terms of having books published and learning the process and the marketing and things, it's a process. You learn these things on the way, and you don't have to be sort of perfect from day one. You do the basics, and then you sort of iterate them and you improve on them, and then you don't. It's not like sort of jumping in saying, "I'm not successful if I haven't had 1,000 downloads for my first episode I put out there." I know it's going to be rough and raw, but I think that's part of the journey.
I wouldn't be here today if I'll be waiting for 1,000 downloads. So.
Yes, so it's learning. It's learning to believe in the journey, and I think, like I learned with the Camino, which was 30 days. It's that seems overwhelming. It seems daunting. How am I going to walk 800 kilometers over 30 days? It just seems so far away. But you break the Camino, you break down into villages, towns, cities, regions, landscapes. And day by day, you get to that first village, then you get to the next village, then you get to the town, then you get, you make progress. And I think that I've used that as a sort of metaphor or template in my mind for when you're embarking on a new project. I'm not going to be Joe Rogan podcasting. If I was to do podcasting, I'm going to do it in my way, but it's going to be a journey. But every day I do this, I learn a bit more, and I improve.
So as I said, I'm happy to recommend you to that podcast. It's not Joe Rogan, so I'm not friends with Joe Rogan.
One day.
One day. After the 1,000 downloads. So I will recommend you to that guy. His name is Luke, but I will send the contact details by private message. I think you are a great match. I've been on his podcast. It was last month, and he's all about visiting places and dismantling myths. So I think you guys would click. I will send you the details, and he's new. He started maybe 2 months ago, and he is very open for new guests. And I think you are the exact profile that he is looking for. So I'm very happy to build the bridge between the two of you. So I will do that after that. So
look forward to that. And thank you for giving me the time to speak and challenging me with some questions. You got me thinking.
Good. That's what we are here for. That's a podcast. So I want to thank you for the insights. I hope they will motivate people out there who are hesitant and they know that there is something there waiting for them, but they don't know exactly how to approach it. The path might not be exactly like yours, but maybe they can get the lessons. That's all that it. We are all different. We've been to experiences that are not always the same, but maybe we are looking for what makes sense to us, what is meaningful, and what suits us. And I think that's what your journey is about. And maybe you can encourage others who are just about to start, but they haven't received the right message. And I think you can provide them with that. So thank you for that.
I hope so. And yeah, if I can just give someone a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, I guess it's worth it.
Okay, so I'm just going to announce for the audience what we have in the pipeline. So I'm traveling tomorrow to Portugal, so there won't be a podcast on Wednesdays. My mother's birthday, so you cannot skip that for an episode. I'm sorry, but it's an old woman's birthday, and that's thing number one on earth. But on Thursday we are back. I mean, I'll still be in Portugal, but I will do a live podcast. So Thursday we have the League of Ireland, so we'll be here discussing the Irish games as we do every Thursday with the lads. And then next Sunday I will be interviewing a Spanish tour guide based in Israel. So we'll be discussing entrepreneurship in Israel, the challenges of promoting a country that is not always well seen, and her journey, like how it is to be an expat. She's not exactly an expat because she's what is called Alia, but we're going to get into this. So that's what we have on the pipeline. So I hope to see everyone in the next couple of episodes, and there's more to come in April, and I look forward to all that. So if you liked what you just listened, please provide us with a thumbs up. If you know someone who's into these topics, share. We are all about spreading information and insights. And if you haven't subscribed, the button is below. Just click there. That's a massive help. So thanks, Stephen, and all the best for your ventures. And keep in touch.
Thank you. Gracias. Ciao.
Ciao. Bye.